in a world of change is timely, given the increasing talk of the unraveling of globalization, which risks fracturing a shared narrative that has supported prosperity in our region for decades. With the gap between rich and poor widening, the erosion of potential productivity, the increased frequency of crises and disasters, inadequacy of financial flows and intermediation process to support people and asset creation, and growing threats from climate change, we are ending up grappling with considerable challenges. Yet, Asia Pacific's growth and trade story have been spectacular. Over 1990 and 2008, GDP grew by 6% annually, sustained by trade expansion as exports in our region grew by 13%. Trade now accounts for over half of Asia Pacific's regional GDP, and Asia Pacific contributes to almost 40% of global exports. Asia Pacific boasts a regional GDP of 27.5 trillion and holds an equivalent share in global GDP as North America and Western Europe at around 36% now. Alternate policy scenarios suggest our region could account for over half of global GDP by 2030. This scenario considerably depends on how Asia Pacific pursues sustained, inclusive and balanced growth through effective implementation of sustainable development. In this context, let me outline some of the essential prerequisites going forward. The first order of priority would be regional political stability and harmony. Among others, Inter-Korean Summit would open up new opportunities for Korean Peninsula and beyond, and can spur regional infrastructure through more cooperative movements. At the same time, collective action is called to address fragilities in different hotspots, some even suffering from humanitarian crisis today. Second issue, which all of you have talked about, is how do we deal with inequalities? It is critical as rising and pervasive income inequalities impacts growth and magnifies social and political tensions. Some degree of income inequality may be inevitable. Inequality of opportunity is a real barrier to development and has intergenerational consequences. Over the past 30 years, income inequality increased in 4 of the 5 of most populous countries in our region, which are home to over 70% of our region's population. Third area, the demographic change afoot in our region is considerable. Today, the aging population is just shy of 550 million. By 2050, it is expected to more than double, raising the percentage of its population age 60 or above from 13 to 25%. Put simply, the Asia-Pacific region is aging at an unprecedented pace with limited time to adapt. Our ability to adapt rapidly calls for action on multiple fronts. Let me turn to the fourth topic, which I believe is very critical to address. Energy excess remains an overwhelming concern for the 420 million people without access to electricity, the 2 billion without clean cooking fuels, and industries face energy shortages. Pollution levels threaten the health of our people. Our region accounts for half of global greenhouse gas emissions, and they are set to rise despite the actions being taken today, given the region's promising growth prospects and the high energy intensity. Something has to change in this context. Being an import-dependent region, the dramatic rise in oil price from $30 per barrel 2 years ago to now $80 per barrel poses renewed macroeconomic complications for bulk of the Asian economies, whose balance of payments are going to be squeezed and the fiscal accounts under stress if the oil prices rise further. Meanwhile, oil exporters, which also constitute a number of our economies, despite relief that is being offered today, and as they recoup the hit caused by the downturn in prices, have yet to fully diversify their economies or build strong fiscal buffers to safeguard their balance sheets, should there be another round of price volatility. On the other hand, the cost of inaction are modest. Transitioning to a low-carbon pathway under a 2-degree scenario has to be central to energy transition and is estimated to cost the region a mere 1.4 to 1.8% of GDP by 2050 and 2% later. The 2030 agenda can only be delivered if multilateralism and global governance reinforces it, but it needs fixing. Trust in multilateral architecture and institutions has eroded. Asia and the Pacific, consistent with its growing role in global economy, is acting more responsibly to foster multilateralism and global governance. But more commitment and action is in order, both from the North and South, in the areas particularly of trade, finance, and climate change. I will now touch upon these 3 critical subjects in context of multilateralism. Focusing on trade, multiple rounds of multilateral trade liberalization over the last 70 years, coupled with liberalization pursued through regional and unilateral trade agreements, resulted in a substantive decline globally in average applied tariffs on industrial goods from around 40 to 4%, great progress. However, offsetting its impact has been substantial rise in non-tariff measures ranging from technical, regulatory to procedural barriers. Further, the 2008 crisis caused governments to expand support measures such as industrial subsidies and financial sector support, which interfere with free flow of goods, services, and investments. Over and above the growing protectionism rhetoric and threats via reintroduction of the 20th century commercial measures undermine markets. The multilateral trading system, eroded by delays in the Doha round, has led to alternative and compromising approaches to liberalization, which is weakening the global system of rules and regulations to protect vested interests. The recent success of WTO trade facilitation agreement, which along with many of the Asia-Pacific plurilateral trade agreements should contribute to enhancing the WTO multilateral trading system. In the face of rising protectionist trade policies, Asia-Pacific countries should: 1. Defend the WTO's dispute settlement mechanism by refusing unilateral retaliatory actions and instead build alliances with other WTO members in the region. 2. Switch priority from negotiation of liberalization to improved rule setting and its enforcement. 3. Nurture these and strengthen regional and plurilateral institutions and agreements that respect principles of non-discrimination, transparency and predictability of rule enforcement, and reduce capacity gaps as fourth item on trade-related matters among countries of the region. Let me switch next. The global agenda of the size and scale being pursued calls for new approaches to financing development. Our dilemma is that despite collective resource potential of over $56 trillion today, including from the regional savings, foreign exchange reserves, and institutional investors' money, our ability to finance even climate-friendly infrastructure, estimated to be close to 27 trillion, remains unattended to in a level and form that is needed today. At the same time, our region's tax potential, which is between 6 to over 16% per country, remains untapped. Capital markets lack depth and liquidity. Local bonds market have yet to fully bloom. Generating new sources of financing and deploying them effectively for development remains a key challenge. New approaches, however, have infused new dynamism in financing for development. Domestic resource mobilization has now become a multilateral concern. Finally, globally, the brunt of deleterious consequences of climate change is visible. Sea level rises, floods, increasingly frequent and severe natural disasters are haunting our region. Global warming and resulting sea level rise means our vast region is exposed to transboundary climate and environmental risk. In 2017, monsoon rains in South Asia claimed 1,200 lives, affected 40 million people, and resulted in loss to exchequer and private sector of 1.2 billion. By 2030, floods could cost the sub-region as much as $215 billion each year. Pollution of air, water, land, and sandstorm is severe and can result in premature deaths. The Paris Agreement on climate change has provided new impetus to multilateral approach to steer execution of climate change accord. However, for it to be achieved, ambition and compliance need to be strengthened. Pledges must be regularly upgraded and substantial transparency introduced so that compliance with pledges can be monitored, international finance technology and capacity building should be delivered to realize these ambitions. Strengthening compliance entails countries acting to punish those that fail to make serious commitments or renege on those that they have made. A better socio-economic and environmental case should be made for the opportunities contained in the Paris Agreement, led nationally determined contributions to public, businesses and other stakeholders in addition to donor opportunities. A common metric is needed to monitor collective progress towards requisite emissions reductions both by states and signatories of the Paris Agreement. Regional platforms such as ours can play a pivotal role in helping countries reinforce multilateral principles and policies, and we are doing so, and develop solutions to promote open and liberal trade regimes, develop capacities to unleash domestic and private resources, and address shared vulnerabilities and risks, which cut across the policy spectrum that I have talked about.